We welcome the man. There's not a commissioner of college football yet, but when they have one, this is the guy that I am voting for. Joel Klatt from Fox, the Joel Klatt Show. What's up?
Man, that's a ringing endorsement. You've never told me that. So now, let's start the campaign. Let's go.
No, you are the most reasonable voice in the sport, and you understand it, and you played it at a high level, and you are one of the few people, because I've seen you have to do this, who can be the analyst on TV and then shift to play-by-play. Like, people don't understand how hard that is.
Well, listen, that was extenuating circumstances, there no doubt. But how you been, man?
I'm good. This has been a crazy season. It feels like it's just flown by. We're talking, a few days before you're going to be in Ann Arbor for Ohio State, Michigan. It's been the weirdest season, and there's 5 undefeated teams. Like, if the 14 playoff is going to go out, at least it's going to go out with a bang.
That's so true. And by the way, the chaos, we always think man, it could be really chaotic. This year could be really chaotic because these teams haven't lost. We haven't seen them lose yet. And this is the year. I mean, I always say it. I just can't wait till we get to the 12-team playoff. I came around on it a few years ago. I wasn't a proponent of the playoff, and now I'm certainly a proponent of the playoff. Can't wait for it to expand. And this year is a great reason why. There's a lot of good football teams that deserve a chance to at least a crack at it. I don't know if anyone can beat Georgia, though, the way that they're playing. And Andy, here's what's so fascinating to me is that Georgia uniquely understands that there's no titles handed out in September. There's no titles handed out in October. They just continue to play better and play better. They remind me of the Patriots in a lot of respects in this way of where it just comes down to it. And you're like, how did Tom Brady play in 10 Super Bowls with the Patriots? Well, it's because every year, every other team had to go through them. That's the way Georgia feels right now. Who's beating Georgia right now?
That's the thing. The way they played against Ole Miss and Tennessee, I just don't know, because I saw the preliminary line came out with the Alabama Georgia SEC championship game, and it's like a 4.5 point line, and I'm like, I'm not sure how Alabama beats them, even though they've evolved into a very good team. But I'm with you.
Yeah, now, and Milroe will have to play out of his mind, but the style of offense that Bama is going to have to play against Georgia is not the style of offense that Georgia generally struggles with if they do struggle. Remember, you've got to have an elite passing attack to play with them. That's what Bama had in 21 when they beat them. That's what they didn't have in the championship game, the national championship game, because of the injuries, namely Jameson Williams. And then that's what Ohio State had before Marvin Harrison left the game last year. And the only other real game where you could say, Georgia probably should have lost that game. That's what you have to have. And I just don't know if Bama is built this year to go and beat Georgia.
No. And now you've got Michigan, which started running the Georgia drill in the offseason. They've got their own stuff going on. Let's talk about this game that you got this week, because the stakes are incredible. They were the same last year. And I remember when last year was played, when that game was played, it didn't feel like the loser was going to get a mulligan. So it was the same kind of intense winner takes all. But the Jim Harbaugh drama, the sign stealing accusations, all of that, the NCAA, the Big Ten, it feels like it just makes it so much bigger because he's not on the sideline. Ryan Day's now coaching against an interim. Like, what if Ryan Day loses to Sharon Moore?
Well, that's again, the layers to this year's game are just deeper and more nuanced and quite frankly more entertaining than last year's version, even though they were both 11-0 last year. And you're right. I know last year felt big, but this year feels even bigger. And the pressure on Ohio State, and namely Ryan Day, to beat Sharon Moore, the distraction swirling around Michigan and this team that has been so consistent and so dominant up until now. And now all of a sudden we're wondering, well, can they protect the passer? Is JJ going to play better than he did against Maryland? All of these things come up. These two teams obviously don't like each other, and the fan bases don't like each other. That's an understatement. And yet it feels like it's gone to 100 this year. The environment, the vitriol, I can't wait to get there. I just can't wait to get there. And I think it's going to be a phenomenal game. And by the way, the fan base confidence has flipped. Middle of the year, Ohio State, they're like, I don't know if we've got it this year. Michigan riding on high. Now you get to this week after the Maryland game and after Travion Henderson has done what he's done in the last 4 weeks for the Buckeyes. I feel like the fan base confidence has flipped. Ohio State fans feel really good about their chances this week. And Michigan fans are sitting there like, boy, can we protect the passer? Is JJ going to play better? Our defense gave up, over 20 points. It's just a fascinating deal.
Well, I think you might have been the first person to point this out because you've had Michigan the last 2 weeks, but that Michigan has had to abandon pieces of their passing game because of protection issues. Ladarius Henderson didn't play. They had to shuffle tackles around because the backup got hurt. What do you think happens in this game in terms of Michigan being able to run their entire offense?
Well, it's a huge question. So Carson Barnhart is now, for me, the most intriguing Michigan player, and he's the other tackle. He's the tackle that was at right tackle for the really majority of the season. Then he moved over to left tackle to fill in for Ladarius Henderson last week. Okay, so Andy, early in the game against Penn State, first it was denied Dennis Sutton, former 5-star guy. Then it was Adisa Isaac. Then it was Chop Robinson. They beat Carson Barnhart fast in the first 2 series.
Oh, yeah.
And it was really obvious. Yeah. It was incredible, right? And it was so obvious. I looked at Gus in the break and I was like, Michigan's in trouble. But they went to the 7 offensive linemen and they just started grinding it out. Yes, you can say like, well, we went back to our roots and we got tough. And they did that because they had to, because they couldn't protect the passer. And then last week, in the most critical series, when Barnhart had to go over to the left tackle after Miles Hinton got hurt, the backup to Ladarius Henderson, he got beat the same way. It was the same speed rush. And now you're going to face a couple of guys, Jack Sawyer, who's playing his best football, JT Tuimoloau, who we know at the top end can take over a game like he did a year ago in Happy Valley against Penn State. And that's why I think people are confident with Ohio State, because Michigan, for the first time all year, has had to come up with answers and abandon points of their offense. I think the one credit that you would give them is that they had the ability to do it. And some teams can't, and they would still have to throw the football and they would get beat because of it. At least Michigan had an answer to the places that they were struggling with.
Well, and the thing is, they've got to be able to do this against Ohio State, because if they beat Ohio State, they're still going to need this against Iowa. Yeah. Even in the Big Ten championship game, but against whoever you find in the playoff, you're going to need that. So Henderson playing seems to be pretty critical.
Yeah, and I think he will. I think Henderson will play. But remember, Barnhart is going to play at right tackle. He's been the right tackle. So like that issue remains, even if Henderson is back, which is fascinating. And then JJ is going to have to play better. I know he's not 100%. His mobility was not 100% against Maryland, and it showed. He panicked a couple of times and made some poor decisions. And we'll see. Last piece of this game, maybe not the last piece, you can ask me more, but Blake Corum. Yeah. Blake Corum hasn't really had a chance to play against Ohio State. It was Hassan Haskins' game 2 years ago, 2021. And last year he had the knee injury against Illinois and didn't play. And it was Donovan Edwards' game. And so, for a guy that scored over 50 touchdowns in his Michigan career, you can imagine he comes back in a year in which we didn't expect him to be here. This is the game he's wanted. And Blake Corum and the way he plays at home in his last game in the Big House, that's going to be something that I'm going to be paying very close attention to.
I did have one more on this one, because you mentioned Travion Henderson, what he's done the last 4 weeks for Ohio State. How important is it for them to have it doesn't even have to be dynamic, but reliable run game just to keep those guys off of Kyle McCord?
So this is what doesn't get talked about. So if I was going inside football a little bit, which I know you love, because you cover the game as well as anybody and know it. What you have to do against Michigan, and I alluded to it last week in the Maryland game, is that you have to put them in nickel defense. So put Mikey Sainristil on the field and get the third defensive tackle off the field. Yeah. And then you've got to be able to run the ball in the interior out of those sets. Well, it just so happens that that's exactly what now Ohio State is very good at, because they get in what's called 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers on the field. This is the set that they major in, the personnel group that they major in. And then you've got to be able to run the ball in the interior. That's what Henderson has been able to do for them. And they have been able to block. They've gotten so much better up front as an offensive line. When I watch the film of this game as compared to like even Indiana in the first week or some of those games, Maryland early in the season, the offensive line on the inside is doing so much better. And their ability to block those defensive tackles when there's only 2 of them in the game, that's where the game is won and lost for Ohio State offensively. It's not technically just the way that they throw the ball, because it's about throwing the ball on schedule. You've got to make sure that Kyle McCord is throwing the ball when he wants to rather than when he has to. And the way that you do that is you get into that nickel situation, get that extra lineman off the field for Michigan, and be able to stay on schedule through the internal run game on those downs.
Kenneth Grant at Michigan, probably the scariest player I've seen all season. Watching him track down, I think it was Katron Allen in the Penn State game.
I've
never seen a 340-pound guy move like that, but you know how I love the big guys. I want to talk about another one of my favorite big guys, Tavondre Sweat in Texas. I saw on your show, you talked about Texas potentially being boxed out by multiple undefeated teams. Now that Jordan Travis has gone down for Florida State, do you feel like that changes the dynamics of that?
I do. And this is unfair. I'm not saying I like this. This sucks for Florida State. And my heart's broken for Jordan. Gosh, like sucks, man. This game is unrelenting in a lot of ways. But having said that, I go back to Ohio State in 2014. You remember JT Barrett got hurt late in that season. And he was their quarterback. And the committee needed to view and see Ohio State with Cardell Jones. The reason they made the playoff that year and ultimately won the national championship is because of what they did in the conference championship game against Wisconsin. They showed that they could remain dominant without their starting quarterback. So therefore, they got included as the 4 seed. I think the same can be true for Florida State. There is a scenario, and I know this sounds wild, and I'm not saying I love this, but I do think that there is a scenario where they remain undefeated and don't go to the playoff. If they have to squeak by Florida, who's not a very good football team, you know this. They've lost 4 straight. They got handled against Utah early in the season. Mertz is now out. Like, you can't go and struggle against Florida. I don't care if it's a rivalry game or on the road. You've got to prove to the committee that you can still be a dominant, still be a great team at the top of college football, even with your backup quarterback. That needs to be proved this week against Florida. Then you can have a play-in game against Louisville. If not, there is a scenario if they struggle and eke out close victories, even if they're undefeated, I think one of these teams might pass them. Like, just sake of argument, let's say Oregon kicks a field goal with 3 seconds left to beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. Well, couldn't you make an argument both of those teams are better than a Florida State team that doesn't have Jordan Travis? Well, yes, of course you can make that argument. So, like, I think that Florida State's in a precarious spot unless they go handle their business against Florida. Their playoff, I think, is on the line this week in the Swamp.
It certainly feels like it, and we'll see what Tate Rodemaker can do. Joel, you are here with us with Hampton by Hilton. And I got to say, I have truly enjoyed those commercials you do with Gus. But I will say what they've done in terms of breakfast, and I realize you travel all the time. You're in these hotels all the time. Knowing you can go down and get that fluffy waffle, it just changes everything about your day.
I'm so glad. And you're a food guy, like Andy, your listeners know this. So I travel all the time. I'm on the road. Gosh, I would say over 100 nights a year. And so, full disclosure, I don't always know exactly where I am when I wake up. Right? Like, are you ever
Joel,
like that?
Joel, when I was traveling, when I worked at SI and traveled like 150 days a year, I would have moments where I'd be on my 5th hotel in 5 days, 5th different hotel in 5 days, and I will walk into the desk. I will show them my ID and say, "I don't know my room number. Here's my ID. Please tell me what my room number is."
I've done the same. I've done the exact same thing. And so for me, what's important is consistency, because what I don't want is to have to wake up, not really know where I'm at. I need breakfast. Right. And so for me, the consistency is huge. I want a good gym. I want to know that I'm in a location that's near where I need to be. And that's certainly what I get. Hampton's everywhere that I need to be. I'm never more than 30 minutes away from where I need to be. And then their consistency as far as the space that I get, the comfort that I get, the service that I get, and then the breakfast. So I can wake up, and this has happened before. I can wake up and be like, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what's going on, but I know that breakfast is right down the elevator. Yeah. And I'm like, perfect. Okay. Coffee, waffle. Now I'm like, okay, what's going on for the day? What do I need to do? And that's what Hampton provides for me. It's the consistency across those 100+ days of travel that I really rely on. It's the consistency of location and experience and space. So I'm thankful for them and to be partnered up with them, and wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, yeah, I got a good travel situation this weekend. I'm so like, I've done Black Friday where I do the Black Friday and then a Saturday double. And I've done it where I've tried to leave my house in Florida on Black Friday and then be at the kickoff of Nebraska, Iowa, either in Iowa City or Lincoln. And I've done it. I've made it as toe met ball. But this one's better because I'm doing the Michigan State, Penn State at Ford Field. And then we'll be at the same game in Ann Arbor on Saturday. But I've already made the plan. Like, I'm going to land in Detroit. I'm going over to Slows, get some Black Friday barbecue, and then I'm going to the game. Yeah, you got.
I love it. That'll be good. And I can't wait to see you. I'll see you in the press box. I'll see you up there.
Yes, sir. Have fun with this one. I can't even imagine the intensity in the booth for something like this. Man. So Joel, appreciate it.
You got it. See you, bud.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.